Let's talk about your autism. When did you
Okay.
first realize that you were different?
Ooh, first realized I was different. 7 or 8 years old.
What did you notice about yourself?
The other kids didn't like me. Um, that I kept on doing things wrong, but I wasn't sure what I was doing wrong, and no one would tell me.
Mm.
That adults were a lot more patient with me and more willing to help me out. But peers weren't.
Mm.
Um, those were the big things that kind of stuck out to me. Um, I was lucky. Um, my parents had a bad experience with my older sister and public school, and so my dad's job allowed for us to be homeschooled, and so my mom took on a lot of the homeschooling, and then later on found a charter school that was based in a couple hours away, but they had a kind of a distance program where they provide curriculum, and this is before the internet really took off. So like part of it was they could, when I was a tween and teen, that my parents could go out and find people to teach subjects, um, and then they would be paid from the charter school to teach the subject. So um, my geometry and algebra teacher was a civil engineer who worked on the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. My
Mm.
chemistry teacher is the head of the Sacramento Water Lab. Last I checked, although at the time he was, an employee there, but this is years ago. So,
Yeah.
one of my art teachers was a professional artist who lived locally, who was willing to teach us,
Hmm.
that sort of stuff. And so it kind of offered some really cool opportunities. And the flip side of that is it also created a buffer. So my exposure to peers was limited to Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, to those classes with peers, and there were small groups, and they tended to be peers who were with parents who are also having those attitudes of like, we want our kids, we don't want our kids to struggle, so we're putting them in a situation where they struggle less. And then of course church.
Hmm.
um, and so between all those settings, like my exposure was definitely limited, and so therefore I believe that I encountered less naturalistic punishment as a result and received more naturalistic reinforcement, for making choices that were, big air quotes here, right in the social
Yeah.
context.
So you said that you were misdiagnosed
Mhm.
with what was that?
Nonverbal learning disorder. Um,
Okay.
there's a lot of very similar characteristics to autism, but
Hmm.
there's not a lot of emphasis on stimming, sensory issues, those sorts of things. It focuses predominantly on misreading social cues. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know what the DSM-5 did with NLD, but um, typically, like with back in the 90s, like with diagnosis of Asperger's versus autism, uh, typically it had to do with someone being diagnosed on it is having a lot more to do with whether there was somebody who was trained in that area.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that's a fun one. And I received the diagnosis when I was 14,
Okay.
so it was later in life. Because I was very verbal and very communicative, and so
Hmm.
it was I was pretty good at just going along and doing things. And so therefore there what my parents didn't feel the need to seek out a diagnosis until I hit the big wall. And again, part of that was the buffering from homeschooling, because
Hmm.
I'm sure that if I had been going to elementary school, um, and middle school, that wall would have hit much harder, much faster.
Yeah. Did you have any true friendships?
My dogs, And I thought I had a true friend when I was a little kid, but it was like a little kid style friendship, and very quickly moved away when he started to mature more than me. When I was 15, 16, I had a couple friends who were younger than me that we connected really well, and we maintained connection pretty decently up until about 18.
Hmm.
And then they kind of drifted away. One of them because, well, this is me attributing. I don't know if this really happened, but one of them drifted away because he was more into the cool crowd, and I definitely wasn't cool.
Mm.
And the other one drifted away because he moved. So
Yeah. So did you receive direct bullying from the other kids?
direct and indirect. When I was 8, um, at church, I told a stupid knock knock joke. It was really dumb, but like it was like I wanted to get attention from my peers, and apparently a couple of the peers didn't like it, and got shoved against the water fountain, socked in the gut, and um, that resulted in us leaving that congregation because the one of the boys was the son of the leader of the congregation, and the other one was the nephew.
Mm.
And
So there was
and
no way they were leaving.
yeah, there's no way they were leaving. And the congregation leader's response was, "Well, what did your son do wrong?" Um, and so there was a lot that there was that. I will say that years later, both of those boys reached out to me and apologized.
Oh,
So I don't want to make anybody out to be a villain. The
yeah.
reality is that I was different and they didn't understand how to deal with different, which is one of the
Yeah.
reasons why acceptance training is so important, especially for children.
Hmm.
Because when we learn how to accept other people who are different, instead of it being us versus them, it's all of us versus the challenges that the world presents us.
Yeah.
So that's a big plus, I have to say. And I think part of the reason why I still have this attitude of celebration, because, like, yeah, something hard happened and it sucked so hard. But flip side of that is growth happened, and
Hmm.
that's big. And we need to
Yeah.
focus on that. Sorry, getting a little
No,
emotional here.
don't be sorry.
um,
Thank you for sharing that.
no problem.
I know how it must feel to open up and really be vulnerable, and I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you.
And there are other kids out there right now who are being bullied, and maybe if some parents are listening to this and take something from it, whether it's educating their kids to not be those bullies, that is a change that you're making.
Yeah.
You've been watching Autism Knows No Borders. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Also, we'd love to hear from you, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Click here to watch this interview in its entirety. You can also find us on your favorite podcast app. Tune in each week for engaging conversations of how people across the globe are inspiring change and building community. Thanks for watching. Take care.